Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm genuinely excited you're here today because what we're about to explore sounds like something straight out of a Hollywood movie, yet it is rooted in real history, real metal, and real collector passion. So get comfortable, stay with me, and imagine for a moment that a single coin, something so ordinary it once passed unnoticed through grocery store tills and pocket change jars, could secretly be worth a staggering $33 million because today we're diving deep into the mysterious, controversial, and endlessly fascinating story of the 1966 no-mint mark $quarter from the United States, a coin that on the surface looks completely normal, yet beneath that calm silver-colored face hides a storm of minting errors, production anomalies, historical circumstances, and theoretical possibilities that have turned it into one of the most talked about and speculated treasures in modern numismatics. And to understand why collectors even whisper about such a jaw-dropping value, we have to slowly unravel everything that went wrong, everything that went strangely right, and everything that still remains unexplained about this particular year and this particular coin. Starting with the fact that 1966 was one of the most chaotic and unusual years in the history of U.S. coinage because America was in the middle of a massive coin shortage driven by rising silver prices, hoarding by the public, and widespread distrust of paper money, which forced the U.S. Mint into emergency mode where speed mattered more than perfection, secrecy mattered more than transparency, and mistakes slipped through that under normal circumstances never would have. And during this period the Mint made a radical decision to remove mint marks entirely from circulating coins between 1965 and 1967 in an attempt to discourage collectors from hoarding specific issues, meaning that the 1966 $quarter carries no mint mark regardless of whether it was struck in Philadelphia or Denver, a decision that alone already blurs the identity of each coin and opens the door to endless debate. But the real story begins with how these quarters were produced using clad composition instead of the traditional 90% silver, a transition that required new machinery, new alloys, new striking pressures, and new quality control protocols that were far from perfected, leading to a perfect storm of striking errors such as off-metal strikes where quarter designs ended up on planchets meant for other denominations, transitional errors where silver planchets intended for 1964 quarters were accidentally fed into 1966 presses, double strikes where the coin was struck twice at slightly different angles creating ghost-like overlapping details, die clashes where the obverse and reverse dies smashed together without a planchet in between leaving haunting mirrored impressions on later coins, and dramatic die cracks and retained cut breaks caused by overused dies that were pushed far beyond their normal lifespan in the rush to produce millions of coins. And when you add to this the possibility of experimental alloy testing that was rumored but never officially documented, some collectors believe that a handful of 1966 quarters may have been struck on prototype compositions that were never meant to leave the mint at all, making them essentially forbidden artifacts of monetary experimentation. And this is where values begin to skyrocket, not because every 1966 quarter is rare, but because the few that exhibit multiple overlapping errors combined with pristine condition and mysterious origins become unique, one-of-a-kind objects that cannot be replicated. And uniqueness is the ultimate currency in the world of elite coin collecting. But the story doesn't stop at physical errors alone because historical context amplifies their importance. As the secrecy of the mint during this era means documentation is scarce, mint records are incomplete, and official confirmation of certain mistakes simply doesn't exist, leaving modern experts to rely on forensic analysis, metallurgical testing, and die study to piece together what happened. And when a coin resists easy explanation, when its weight, composition, strike quality, and microscopic features don't match any known standard, its mystique grows exponentially, drawing in wealthy collectors who are willing to pay extraordinary sums not just for metal but for the unanswered questions embedded within it. And this is why some specialists argue that a top-tier 1966 no-mint mark quarter exhibiting a transitional silver strike combined with a dramatic double die obverse, extreme die rotation, and a documented provenance tracing it back to an early discovery during the late 1960s could theoretically command a value in the tens of millions because it would represent a convergence of history, era rarity, and narrative power that no amount of money could recreate. And provenance plays a critical role here because a coin's story can be just as valuable as its physical form, with examples that surface directly from old mint employee estates, sealed bank bags, or long-forgotten safety deposit boxes carrying an aura of authenticity that fuels bidding wars among elite buyers. And then there's the role of condition, because era coins are often poorly struck or damaged. Yet when an era coin survives in near-perfect uncirculated or proof-like condition, it defies expectations and becomes exponentially rarer, and the idea of a flawless or near-flawless 1966 era quarter is so unlikely that it alone justifies astronomical valuations. But the debate around $33 million also reflects the psychology of modern collecting, where ultra-high net worth individuals view rare coins as portable stores of wealth, historical trophies, and alternative investments that are immune to traditional market volatility. And when such buyers compete, logic often gives way to emotion, ego, and the desire to own something no one else can ever have, pushing prices into realms that sound unbelievable to the average person. Yet history shows us time and again that record-breaking sales happen precisely because rarity plus story plus mystery creates irresistible demand, and it's important to understand that the term worth in this context doesn't mean every 1966 quarter is valuable, but rather that under a perfect storm of attributes a single example could redefine what collectors are willing to pay, especially if it challenges existing knowledge and forces the numismatic community to rewrite part of its understanding of mint history. And this potential for rewriting history is incredibly powerful because collectors are not just buying an object but buying a role in preserving and shaping the narrative of American money itself. And when you think about the quarter's design featuring George Washington, a symbol of national identity, freedom, and continuity, the idea that a flawed version of that symbol could become one of the most valuable coins ever made adds an almost poetic layer to the story, as if the imperfections themselves reflect the turbulent economic era in which the coin was born. And as rumors circulate about undiscovered specimens still hiding in old collections, inherited jars, or estate holdings, the legend grows stronger, inspiring everyday people to re-examine their change and dream that they too might stumble upon a life-changing piece of history. And while experts caution that claims of multimillion-dollar values require extraordinary evidence, the mere possibility keeps the conversation alive, fuels online searches, and draws new audiences into the world of coin collecting, proving that even in a digital age, the allure of tangible treasure remains powerful. And so the 1966 no-mint mark quarter dollar stands as a symbol of how mistakes, when combined with rarity, timing, and human fascination, can transform something ordinary into something legendary, a reminder that value is not always about perfection but about story, scarcity, and the endless curiosity that drives us to look closer at the everyday objects we once took for granted, because somewhere between those microscopic die cracks, unexpected metal compositions, and undocumented mint decisions lies the reason collectors continue to whisper about $33 million, and as long as that whisper persists, the legend of this coin will continue to grow, captivating imaginations, sparking debates, and inviting all of us to wonder what other secrets might still be hiding in plain sight inside the smallest pieces of our shared history. Next, 1979 no-mint mark quarter dollar from the United States, a coin that most people alive today have actually handled at some point without ever suspecting that under very specific and rare circumstances it could be valued not in cents, or even thousands of dollars but in a mind-bending $27 million. A number that sounds unreal until you begin to understand the perfect collision of errors, production chaos, transitional uncertainty, and collector psychology that surrounds this particular year. Because 1979 was not just another routine year at the U.S. Mint but a period marked by internal adjustments, heavy production demands, evolving die technology, and subtle yet critical changes in how coins were struck, inspected, and released into circulation. And once again the absence of a mint mark on certain quarters opens the door to confusion, mystery, and misidentification, as no mint mark traditionally indicates production at the Philadelphia Mint. Yet during this era, coins were shipped, mixed, and distributed nationwide in ways that often obscured their true origin, and that uncertainty alone becomes fertile ground for high-value anomalies to emerge. But the real fascination begins with the types of errors and mistakes known to exist or theorized to exist on a tiny number of 1,979 quarters. Starting with dramatic double-die obverse and reverse varieties where the inscriptions, dates, and even Washington's profile appear slightly doubled due to misaligned dies during hubbing, errors that are notoriously difficult to spot with the naked eye yet become breathtaking under magnification, especially when the doubling is strong and consistent across multiple design elements, and when such doubling appears on a quarter that otherwise exhibits razor-sharp details and original mint luster, the rarity multiplies exponentially. But doubling is only the beginning. Because off-center strikes also plague high-speed presses during this time, resulting in coins where the design is visibly shifted away from the center, sometimes cutting off letters or exposing blank planchet areas. And while minor off-center strikes are collectible, extreme examples that still retain a full date and strong design command enormous premiums, especially when combined with other errors on the same coin. And then there are broad strikes caused by coins struck without a retaining collar, allowing the metal to spread outward and create an unusually wide, thin quarter with distorted lettering, a striking visual that immediately signals something went wrong inside the press. And when a broad strike occurs on a quarter that also shows die rotation, where the reverse is misaligned relative to the obverse, the result is a compound error that pushes the coin into elite territory. But perhaps the most intriguing possibilities involve wrong planchet errors, where a 1979 quarter design may have been struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, or even a foreign coin, leading to discrepancies in weight, thickness, color, and sound. And such errors are not theoretical fantasies but documented realities within mint operations, particularly during periods of heavy output when bins of blank planchets were moved rapidly between machines, and when a quarter design appears on a planchet that does not match known specifications, collectors immediately take notice. Because every deviation from the norm narrows the population of similar coins, and rarity is the heartbeat of value. Yet the conversation around $27 million intensifies when collectors consider the possibility of experimental or undocumented planchets, as the late 1970s were a time when the mint continued testing metal compositions and striking pressures to improve durability and reduce costs. And although official records rarely acknowledge such experiments escaping into circulation, history has proven repeatedly that some do, and when metallurgical analysis reveals alloy ratios that do not align with any standard issue, the coin transcends error status and becomes an artifact of hidden mint history, something that was never meant to exist outside controlled environments. And that forbidden quality adds a powerful mystique that wealthy collectors find irresistible. But condition again plays a decisive role because many error coins survive in battered states after years of circulation, whereas a 1979 no-mint mark quarter exhibiting major errors yet remaining in near-mint or proof-like condition defies probability, suggesting it was discovered early, preserved intentionally, or removed directly from original rolls or bags, and such preservation transforms an already rare object into a once-in-a-generation discovery. And then there is the matter of die deterioration errors, including heavy die cracks, retained cuds, and even shattered dies that leave dramatic raised metal patterns across the coin's surface, each one acting like a fingerprint of a specific moment when the die was failing under pressure. And when such features are bold, visually striking, and well documented, they elevate a coin from curiosity to centerpiece. Yet the potential for a $27 million valuation also reflects how modern collecting has evolved into a global arena where ultra-wealthy buyers view rare coins as both cultural assets and strategic investments. And when such buyers encounter a coin that combines extreme rarity, compelling visual drama, unresolved questions, and a strong narrative connection to a transitional era in American minting, the price becomes whatever two determined individuals are willing to battle over, because value at this level is no longer about price guides but about desire, prestige, and the power of ownership, and provenance once again becomes crucial, as a 1979 quarter traced back to an early discovery. A reputable collection, or a documented chain of custody gains credibility and trust, both of which are essential when numbers reach into the millions, and it's important to remember that claims of such extraordinary value apply only to the most exceptional examples, not the average coin found in pocket change, yet the legend persists because the possibility remains real, and as long as even one unexplained specimen exists or is rumored to exist, the story continues to grow, inspiring collectors and casual viewers alike to look closer, learn more, and imagine that history's greatest treasures are not always locked away in museums but sometimes hidden in the most ordinary places, and so the 1979 no-mint mark $quarter stands as another reminder that mistakes, when shaped by time, secrecy, and human fascination, can become masterpieces of numismatic legend, turning everyday metal into a symbol of rarity, mystery, and astonishing value, and as this story spreads, the coin's reputation grows stronger, ensuring that its place in the ongoing conversation about America's most valuable errors remains firmly secured. Next, 1987 mint mark D $quarter from the United States, a coin many people remember from everyday circulation in the late 20th century, yet one that under extraordinarily rare and specific circumstances has been discussed in elite numismatic circles with a theoretical face value reaching as high as $23 million. A figure that sounds impossible until you understand how unusual the year 1987 truly was for quarter production, and how a chain of mistakes, shortages, and overlooked anomalies transformed a normally forgettable coin into a potential multimillion-dollar legend, because 1987 was a year when the U.S. Mint struck no quarters for general circulation at the Philadelphia Mint, making Denver and San Francisco the primary sources for that year's quarter output. A fact that already makes the 1987 D quarter historically distinct, since every circulating example had to come from the Denver Mint, instantly concentrating production pressure on a single facility and increasing the likelihood of mechanical fatigue, die overuse, and quality control lapses. And when a mint is tasked with meeting national demand alone, speed inevitably takes priority over perfection, which is precisely when rare and dramatic errors are most likely to occur. And one of the most important factors driving extreme value speculation for the 1987 D quarter lies in the possibility of exceptionally rare transitional and wrong planchet errors, as the late 1980s were a time of continued experimentation with metal sourcing, annealing processes, and blank preparation, and when quarter designs are struck on planchets intended for other denominations or experimental batches, the resulting coins immediately fall into a category so rare that population estimates often drop to single digits or even one-of-a-kind status. And when metallurgical testing reveals a weight or alloy inconsistency that cannot be matched to any officially released coin, collectors begin to understand they are looking at something that was never supposed to exist, which is where valuations leave the realm of logic and enter the realm of legend. But composition alone is not enough, because striking errors play an equally powerful role, particularly dramatic double-die obverse varieties where the date, lettering, and Washington's profile exhibit strong, clearly separated doubling caused by misaligned hub impressions during die creation, a process that by the 1980s was more controlled than in earlier decades, making such errors far rarer and therefore far more valuable when they do occur. And when such doubling is paired with an equally dramatic double-die reverse affecting the eagle, lettering, or arrows, the coin becomes a compound error of extraordinary significance. And then there are off-center strikes that occurred when planchets were not properly seated in the striking chamber, leading to designs shifted far from center while still retaining a full date and mint mark, a crucial factor for value, because off-center coins missing the date lose much of their appeal, whereas those with complete identifying features become centerpieces of advanced collections, and broad strikes also emerge during this year due to collar malfunctions, producing quarters that appear unnaturally wide and thin with distorted rims, and when a broad strike is combined with die rotation, where the reverse is misaligned by significant degrees relative to the obverse, the visual impact is immediate and unmistakable, signaling a catastrophic failure within the press at the exact moment of striking. But perhaps the most visually arresting errors associated with the 1987 D quarter involve severe die deterioration and die break phenomena, including massive die cracks that snake across Washington's face or the fields. Retained cuds where chunks of the die break away yet remain partially attached, and even shattered die states that leave chaotic raised metal patterns across the surface of the coin, each one capturing a frozen moment of mechanical collapse, and such errors are especially compelling when they appear on coins that otherwise retain strong luster, sharp detail, and minimal signs of circulation, because that combination suggests early discovery and careful preservation, something that dramatically enhances both rarity and desirability. Yet the discussion of a $23 million valuation also hinges on the concept of uniqueness or near uniqueness, because in the highest tiers of collecting, a coin does not need to be officially priced to be valuable, it only needs to be impossible to replace. And when a single 1987 D quarter emerges that combines multiple severe errors, an undocumented composition anomaly, pristine condition, and a credible provenance linking it to an early discovery or a respected collection, it becomes a trophy asset rather than a commodity, something that wealthy collectors pursue not just for financial gain but for the prestige of owning an object that stands alone in numismatic history, and provenance becomes essential at this level, as documentation showing a chain of custody, expert authentication, and scientific analysis builds trust and legitimacy, allowing buyers to justify extraordinary prices. And it's also important to understand the psychological dimension of modern high-end collecting, where coins are viewed as portable history, compact stores of wealth, and symbols of expertise and power. And when two or more determined buyers decide that a particular coin represents the pinnacle of modern-era collecting, price ceilings evaporate, because value is no longer dictated by guides or auction records but by desire, rivalry, and the fear of missing out on a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And while it must always be emphasized that such values apply only to the most extreme and exceptional examples rather than ordinary 1987 D quarters found in circulation, the legend persists because history has shown that extraordinary discoveries do happen, often decades after a coin was struck, hidden in collections, estates, or forgotten holdings, and this persistent possibility keeps collectors searching, studying, and hoping, reinforcing the idea that even modern coins are not immune to myth-making and monumental value. And so the 1987 mint mark D quarter dollar stands as yet another powerful reminder that rarity is not defined solely by age but by circumstance, error, and survival, proving that even within living memory, a simple piece of pocket change can evolve into a multi-million-dollar symbol of human imperfection, industrial pressure, and the enduring fascination with objects that were never meant to be special yet became legendary precisely because everything went wrong at exactly the right moment. Next, 1998 mint mark P quarter dollar steps forward to prove that even in the late 20th century, mistakes, anomalies, and quiet mysteries were still slipping through the cracks of the U.S. Mint, creating the conditions for a coin that under extremely rare and specific circumstances has been spoken about with a theoretical face value reaching $18 million. A number that seems almost unbelievable for a coin many people remember spending without a second thought, yet when you peel back the layers of how the 1998 P quarter was made, distributed, and occasionally mismade, the story becomes far more compelling, because 1998 was a transitional moment just before the launch of the state quarters program, a period when the mint was operating under intense pressure to meet circulating demand while simultaneously preparing new designs, new dies, and new production schedules. And that split focus created an environment where quality control vulnerabilities quietly increased. Especially at the Philadelphia Mint, which traditionally struck enormous quantities of coins and relied heavily on high-speed presses that pushed dies and planchets to their limits, and it is precisely in such environments that extraordinary errors are born, beginning with the possibility of strong double die obverse and reverse varieties, where misalignment during the hubbing process caused clear doubling on inscriptions, dates, and design elements, errors that by the 1990s were far rarer than in earlier decades due to improved technology, making any confirmed example instantly significant. But doubling alone does not create multimillion-dollar speculation, because the conversation escalates when such doubling appears in combination with other major errors on the same coin, such as dramatic off-center strikes where the design is shifted far from the center yet retains a fully visible date and mint mark. A crucial detail that preserves the coin's identity and dramatically increases its value. And then there are broad strikes resulting from collar failures, producing quarters that spread outward unnaturally with distorted rims and lettering, visual evidence of a press malfunction that collectors instantly recognize. And when a broad strike also shows die rotation, sometimes by extreme degrees, the result is a compound error that captures a moment of mechanical chaos frozen in metal. But perhaps the most fascinating possibilities surrounding the 1998 P quarter involve wrong planchet and wrong composition errors, because during this time the mint was handling massive quantities of blanks for multiple denominations, and occasional mix-ups did occur, leading to quarter designs struck on planchets intended for other coins, resulting in mismatched weights, thicknesses, and metallic signatures that stand out immediately under scientific testing. And when a quarter design appears on a planchet that does not correspond to any officially issued specification, collectors and researchers begin to suspect experimental or undocumented blanks, a theory that gains traction because the mint has historically tested alloys and processes quietly, leaving behind only rare physical evidence when something escaped into circulation. And such a coin becomes more than an error, it becomes an artifact of hidden experimentation, something never meant for public hands. Which is exactly the kind of object elite collectors obsess over. But again, condition plays an outsized role. Because most era coins show heavy wear, yet when a 1998 P quarter with multiple major errors survives in near mint or proof-like condition, it suggests early discovery, careful handling, or removal directly from original rolls, all of which elevate the coin into a different category entirely. And then there are die deterioration errors to consider, including severe die cracks, retained cuds, and late-stage die states where the metal flow creates dramatic raised patterns across the surface. Each one telling the story of a die pushed beyond its safe lifespan in the rush to meet production quotas. And while minor die cracks are common, extreme examples that dominate the coin's appearance are far rarer and far more desirable, especially when paired with sharp strikes and original luster. Yet the idea of an $18 million valuation ultimately rests on the concept of uniqueness or near uniqueness. Because at the highest levels of collecting, a coin's value is determined less by published price guides and more by whether it can ever be replaced. And if a single 1998 P quarter exists that combines a rare double die, a dramatic striking error, an unexplained composition anomaly, pristine condition, and strong provenance supported by expert analysis, then its value becomes whatever the most determined buyer is willing to pay, and provenance becomes essential here. As documentation tracing the coin's history, certification by respected authorities, and metallurgical testing provide the credibility needed to justify extraordinary prices, and this is where modern numismatics intersects with investment psychology, because ultra-wealthy collectors increasingly view rare coins as compact, transportable stores of historical and financial value, immune to inflation and market volatility. And when such buyers compete for an object that represents the pinnacle of modern-era collecting, price ceilings dissolve, driven by prestige, rivalry, and the desire to own something no one else can claim. And while it must always be emphasized that such valuations apply only to the most exceptional and verified specimens rather than ordinary 1998 P quarters found in everyday change, the legend persists because history has repeatedly shown that extraordinary discoveries often surface decades later, hidden in collections, estates, or forgotten holdings. And this persistent possibility keeps the story alive, inspiring people to look closer at even the most modern coins. And so the 1998 mint mark P quarter dollar earns its place in this unfolding saga as proof that rarity is not defined by age alone but by circumstance, error, secrecy, and survival, reminding us once again that even in an era of advanced technology and tight controls, the smallest imperfections can transform an ordinary piece of metal into a multi-million-dollar symbol of mystery, human fallibility, and the enduring magic of hidden treasure. Next, 1990 mint mark P quarter dollar from the United States, a coin that most people would never glance at twice, yet under extraordinarily rare and specific circumstances has been discussed among advanced collectors with a speculative face value reaching $16 million, a figure that sounds shocking until you understand how the conditions surrounding its production, the types of errors associated with it, and the psychology of elite collecting all converge to elevate a simple quarter into the realm of modern numismatic mythology, because 1990 was a year when the Philadelphia Mint was operating at immense capacity, producing vast quantities of circulating coinage using high-speed automated presses that, while technologically advanced, were not immune to failure, fatigue, or human oversight, and when production volume rises to such levels, even small deviations in alignment, pressure, or material handling can result in dramatic errors that slip past inspection, especially when inspectors are focused on speed rather than microscopic perfection. And one of the most significant contributors to extreme value speculation for the 1990 P quarter lies in the possibility of rare and bold double die obverse and reverse errors, where misalignment during the hubbing process caused visible doubling on the date, lettering, and Washington's portrait. Errors that by the 1990s had become increasingly uncommon due to improved die-making technology, which paradoxically makes any confirmed example far more valuable than similar errors from earlier decades. And when such doubling is strong enough to be unmistakable without magnification, it instantly places the coin into a category of rarity that commands serious attention. But doubling alone is rarely enough to drive multimillion-dollar discussions, because the true fascination begins when a 1990 P quarter exhibits multiple overlapping errors, such as off-center strikes where the design is significantly shifted yet still retains a complete date and mint mark, preserving the coin's identity while dramatically increasing its visual impact and desirability. And then there are broad strikes caused by collar malfunctions, producing coins that appear wider and thinner than normal with distorted rims and stretched lettering, unmistakable signs of a press failure frozen in time. And when a broad strike is paired with substantial die rotation, sometimes approaching extreme angles, the result is a compound error that captures a moment of mechanical breakdown that collectors find irresistible. But perhaps the most intriguing possibilities surrounding the 1990 P quarter involve wrong planchet and wrong composition errors, because during this period the mint was processing enormous quantities of blanks for multiple denominations simultaneously, and despite strict procedures, mix-ups did occur, leading to quarter designs struck on planchets intended for other coins, resulting in mismatched weights, thicknesses, and metallic signatures that immediately stand out under scientific analysis. And when such a coin does not match any known official specification, the conversation shifts toward undocumented or experimental planchets, a theory that gains credibility because the mint has historically tested alloys and processes quietly, leaving behind only rare physical evidence when something escaped into circulation. And such a coin becomes more than an error, it becomes a relic of hidden experimentation, something never meant for public hands, which dramatically amplifies its mystique and desirability. Yet condition remains a decisive factor, because most error coins show signs of wear, mishandling, or damage, whereas a 1990 P quarter exhibiting major errors while retaining near mint or proof-like condition defies expectation and probability, suggesting early discovery and careful preservation, perhaps even removal directly from original mint rolls. And that level of preservation transforms rarity into near uniqueness, especially when paired with dramatic die deterioration errors such as massive die cracks, retained cuds, and late-stage die failures that leave bold raised metal patterns across the surface, each one acting as a fingerprint of a specific moment when the die was pushed beyond its limits. And while minor die cracks are common, extreme examples that dominate the coin's appearance are far rarer and far more valuable, particularly when combined with sharp detail and original luster. Yet the idea of a $16 million valuation ultimately rests on the principle that at the highest levels of collecting, value is defined not by price guides but by irreplaceability. Because if a single 1990 P quarter exists that combines a dramatic double die, a severe striking error, an unexplained composition anomaly, exceptional condition, and credible provenance supported by expert authentication and metallurgical testing, then its value becomes whatever a determined buyer is willing to pay, and provenance is essential here, as a documented chain of custody, early discovery history, and certification by respected authorities provide the trust necessary to justify extraordinary numbers, and this is where modern numismatics intersects with investment psychology, as ultra-wealthy collectors increasingly view rare coins as compact stores of history, symbols of prestige, and hedges against economic uncertainty, and when two or more such collectors fixate on a single, irreplaceable object, price ceilings simply dissolve, driven by rivalry, emotion, and the desire to own something no one else can ever replicate. And while it must always be emphasized that such extraordinary values apply only to the most extreme and verified specimens rather than ordinary 1990p quarters found in circulation, the legend persists because history has shown that astonishing discoveries often surface decades later, hidden in collections, estates, or forgotten holdings, and this lingering possibility keeps the story alive, inspiring collectors and casual viewers alike to look closer at even the most familiar coins. And so the 1990 mint mark P $quarter earns its place in this unfolding narrative as proof that modern coinage still holds the power to surprise, reminding us that rarity is born not only from age but from circumstance, imperfection, secrecy, and survival. And that even a coin from within living memory can one day stand as a multimillion-dollar testament to the extraordinary outcomes of ordinary mistakes. Welcome back once again to everyone who has stayed with this extraordinary journey from the mid-1960s through the late 1990s, because now we bring together the full story of these 5 remarkable $quarter into one continuous, deeply connected narrative that shows how ordinary coins, struck for everyday use, became the foundation for some of the most astonishing value claims in modern numismatics. And when we look at the 1966 no mint mark quarter, the 1979 no mint mark quarter, the 1987 D quarter, the 1998 P quarter, and the 1990 P quarter as a group rather than as isolated curiosities, a powerful pattern emerges, one that explains why collectors even dare to speak in terms of 33 million, 27 million, 23 million, 18 million, and $16 million, not as fantasy figures but as theoretical outcomes born from rarity, compounded error complexity, historical pressure, and human psychology, because these 5 coins collectively represent decades of U.S. mint evolution, each one produced during a period of transition, stress, experimentation, or restructuring, and it is precisely during such periods that the most extraordinary mistakes occur, starting with the 1966 quarter, born in the aftermath of the silver crisis, when the mint was racing against hoarding, economic fear, and public distrust, stripping mint marks, changing metal compositions, and pushing machinery beyond safe limits, creating a chaotic environment where transitional silver planchets, double strikes, die clashes, die breaks, off-metal errors, and undocumented experimental alloys could realistically escape into circulation. And when a single 1966 quarter combines multiple of these factors in pristine condition with credible provenance, it becomes not just an error coin but a physical record of a broken system under pressure. Which is why its speculative value sits at the peak of this group, yet the story does not fade as time moves forward. Because the 1979 no mint mark quarter proves that even years later, when the mint appeared more stable, complexity and speed still allowed rare errors to form, especially as high-speed presses, mixed planchet handling, and evolving hubbing techniques introduced new types of doubling, off-center strikes, broad strikes, and die rotation errors. And when these mechanical failures overlapped with possible experimental planchets and unusually strong die varieties, the result was a coin that challenged assumptions about how controlled modern minting truly was, driving collectors to imagine valuations reaching $27 million for the most extreme, singular examples, and then the 1987 D quarter enters the narrative as a historical anomaly, a year when Philadelphia struck no quarters for circulation at all, forcing Denver to shoulder the entire burden, creating an environment of overproduction, die fatigue, and increased error probability, and in that pressure cooker, dramatic double dies, severe die deterioration, shattered dies, wrong planchet strikes, and compound errors emerged, And when such a coin also survives in exceptional condition with scientific confirmation of its anomalies, its uniqueness elevates it into trophy status, explaining why collectors speak of $23 million not as hype but as the natural outcome of irreplaceability. Yet the late 1990s bring a new dimension to the story, because the 1998 P quarter exists at the edge of the state quarter's transition, a moment when the mint was simultaneously producing massive quantities of traditional quarters while preparing entirely new designs, dies, and production workflows, a split focus that quietly increased vulnerability to error, and during this time, rare double dies, off-center strikes, broad strikes, collar failures, die rotations, wrong planchet errors, and possible experimental alloys again slipped through, and when a 1998 P quarter displays multiple of these features while retaining near mint or proof-like condition, it becomes proof that even advanced technology cannot eliminate human and mechanical imperfection, supporting speculative values approaching $18 million. And finally, the 1990 P quarter completes the picture by demonstrating how sheer production volume alone can generate rarity, because when millions upon millions of coins are struck at high speed, dies wear faster, alignment drifts, planchets mix, and inspection standards inevitably relax, allowing dramatic double dies, off-center strikes, broad strikes, die cracks, retained cuds, and unexplained composition anomalies to emerge, and when these errors converge on a single coin with verified provenance and scientific backing, its value becomes uncapped by traditional guides, settling instead at a theoretical $16 million based on uniqueness and demand. But what truly binds these 5 coins together is not just the errors themselves but the way modern collectors think, because at the highest levels of numismatics, value is no longer driven by age alone but by narrative power, by the ability of a coin to tell a story that no other coin can tell, and these 5 quarters collectively narrate the hidden history of American minting, revealing moments when systems failed, rules bent, and secrets escaped into circulation. And when a coin forces experts to ask new questions, rewrite assumptions, or acknowledge undocumented practices, it gains a level of importance that transcends metal and denomination, and this is why provenance, certification, and scientific testing are so critical, because they transform speculation into credibility, allowing wealthy collectors, museums, and investors to justify extraordinary prices not as reckless spending but as strategic acquisition of cultural artifacts, and psychology plays an enormous role here. Because when 2 or more determined buyers compete for an object that cannot be replaced, logic dissolves and emotion takes control, pushing prices into realms that sound unbelievable to the average person yet make perfect sense within elite circles. And this is reinforced by the modern view of rare coins as portable wealth, immune to inflation, political instability, and market crashes, making them attractive not just as collectibles but as alternative assets. And while it must always be stated clearly that the vast majority of these quarters are worth only face value or modest premiums, the existence of even one verified, extreme example keeps the legend alive, inspiring people to search, study, and believe that life-changing discoveries are still possible. And when all 5 coins are viewed together, their combined theoretical value exceeds $117 million, a figure that symbolizes not guaranteed prices but the upper limits of what rarity, error complexity, historical timing, and human desire can produce, and this combined narrative serves as a reminder that history does not only live in textbooks or museums but sometimes hides in the smallest, most overlooked objects, waiting for the right eyes to recognize their significance. And as long as these stories continue to circulate, these 5 quarters will remain more than coins. They will remain symbols of how imperfection, when aligned with circumstance and curiosity, can transform ordinary change into extraordinary legend, encouraging every viewer to look closer, question assumptions, and remember that even the simplest objects can carry stories worth millions.